My beloved child, catch this moment before it slips past you, because someone connected to your heart has been carrying a message they almost convinced themselves never to reveal. They have gone over the words again and again, changing them, softening them, questioning them, and then returning to the same thought: if I stay silent now, will I regret it later? That is why this feels urgent. Not because you should rush. Not because you should fear what comes next. But because hesitation is standing between two people and a truth that has waited long enough to be acknowledged. Stay a little longer, because what they want to tell you is not what you might expect. Something has shifted inside your soulmate. For a while, they believed they could simply continue as though everything were normal. They tried to focus on ordinary things. They told themselves that time would make the feeling quieter. Yet whenever their mind became still, one unfinished conversation returned. Your name returned. A memory returned. And behind all of it was one sentence they could never quite say aloud. Here is where the story changes. The message is not only about how they feel about you. It is about something they finally understand about themselves because of you. Don't skip this next part, because this is where their hesitation begins to make sense. Your soulmate has been standing between two versions of themselves, the version that protects everything through silence, and the version that finally chooses honesty. Until recently, silence felt easier. It required no explanation. No vulnerable conversation. No uncertain next chapter. But something happened within their thinking. They began imagining the future, and in that future they saw one possibility they could no longer ignore. What if they waited so long to speak that the moment simply passed? That question changed everything. Now imagine them preparing the words. They begin with one sentence, erase it, and start again. Not because the truth is complicated, but because it matters. They want you to understand the difference between temporary emotion and something that has remained through changing circumstances. And what they are realizing is that whatever this connection means to them, it has stayed present longer than they expected. That realization has made their next decision impossible to postpone forever. But there is another layer. Stay till the final moment, because the most important part of their message may not be, "I miss you," or even, "I still care." Those words would be too simple. What they truly want you to understand is that they have been reconsidering a choice they once believed was settled. Something they thought they could leave behind has returned with completely different meaning. And suddenly, the future they pictured without addressing this connection no longer feels complete. What if this moment changes the direction of everything that follows? Your soulmate is beginning to understand that important connections cannot always be measured by perfect timing. Sometimes clarity arrives late. Sometimes people need distance from a moment before they understand what it was trying to teach them. And sometimes the words that matter most are the ones people nearly never say. That is exactly why they are close to changing their mind. One side of them says, "Tell the truth while you still have the courage." Another says, "Wait. Maybe tomorrow will be easier." But tomorrow has already been their excuse more than once. And now something inside them is asking a completely different question. What if tomorrow becomes another week, another month, another missed opportunity? Stay with this, because the message is getting closer. They are not searching for perfect words anymore. They are searching for one honest beginning. One opening that could finally explain why they became quiet, why their behavior may have seemed confusing, and why you remained somewhere in their thoughts even when nothing was being said. And when that opening finally comes, it may begin with a truth you never expected them to admit. Because the secret they have been protecting is not simply about the past. It is about what they are considering doing next. And before you leave, hear this carefully: their biggest hesitation is disappearing faster than they expected. The question is no longer whether they have something important to tell you. They do. The real question is whether they will finally choose the moment to say it. And what they have decided about you when they do. Something unexpected is happening behind their silence, and this is where the message takes a direction you probably didn't see coming. Your soulmate has stopped asking themselves whether this connection mattered. Deep inside, they already know the answer. The question occupying their thoughts now is far more important: what am I going to do about it? Stay a little longer, because the answer they are approaching could explain why they have been so close to speaking, and then suddenly pulling back. For some time, they believed they needed certainty before saying anything. Perfect timing. Perfect circumstances. Perfect words. But slowly, they discovered something surprising: waiting for perfection was becoming another form of hesitation. Every time they delayed the conversation, the truth remained. Every time they tried to move their attention elsewhere, something reminded them that one chapter between you still felt unfinished. And now they are beginning to wonder whether the unfinished part was never meant to disappear. Perhaps it was waiting for both of you to understand something first. Don't skip what comes next, because this is the turning point. Your soulmate has recently looked at this connection from an entirely different perspective. Instead of asking, "Why did everything happen this way?" they started asking, "What did all of this reveal to me?" That single change in perspective opened a door they had kept closed. They recognized things about you they had overlooked before. Your patience. Your presence. The way certain moments with you stayed memorable long after they happened. Even the smallest details began carrying new meaning. And then came the realization they were not prepared for. They may have misunderstood what they truly needed. For a long time, your soulmate thought clarity would come from moving farther away from their feelings. Instead, distance made certain truths easier to see. What once felt confusing began becoming simple. They started separating temporary doubts from the deeper connection they could not easily explain away. And somewhere during that process, one thought became impossible to ignore. What if the person I kept trying to understand was actually the person who helped me understand myself? Stay till the end, because there is still one piece missing. They want to tell you something about a decision. Not a dramatic promise. Not an impossible prediction. A real internal decision about how they want to approach you differently if another opportunity appears. They no longer want silence to speak for them. They no longer want assumptions deciding what you believe. And most importantly, they don't want you interpreting their hesitation as proof that you meant nothing. Quite the opposite. Their hesitation may exist precisely because this conversation matters so much to them. Pause on that thought. Sometimes people speak quickly when nothing important is at stake. But when words could redefine an entire connection, they rehearse them privately. They imagine different responses. They wonder whether they waited too long. They question whether the other person would even want to hear them anymore. Your soulmate has been wrestling with those questions. Yet one question is beginning to overpower all the others. What if I say nothing and always wonder what could have happened? That thought has brought them closer to honesty than they have been before. And if this message is resonating with you, you can share it with someone who might need the reminder. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe if you enjoy exploring these deeper moments together. Now stay close, because we have not reached the biggest revelation yet. There is one particular truth your soulmate wants you to understand before anything else. They don't expect you to freeze your life while they figure themselves out. That matters. Their awakening is not supposed to become your waiting room. You are still meant to grow, choose, learn, and move confidently toward your own future. And strangely, seeing you become stronger may be exactly what forced them to confront what they had been avoiding. Because suddenly they understood something. You might not always be standing in the same place where they left the conversation unfinished. That realization changed the urgency. Now the words they kept postponing feel different. They are no longer thinking only about what happened between you. They are thinking about what could happen if honesty finally replaced uncertainty. And just when you think you know what they are preparing to say, another revelation appears. The message they are holding contains one sentence they have never allowed themselves to express clearly. One sentence that could explain the silence. One sentence that could change how you understand their hesitation. And in the next moment, you are going to discover why they have been afraid, not of you, but of what admitting this truth would require them to finally change. Now the hidden piece comes into focus, and it changes the meaning of everything that came before. Your soulmate has realized that telling you the truth is only half of the challenge. The other half is becoming consistent with that truth afterward. Anyone can say meaningful words in an emotional moment. But your soulmate knows that if they finally open this conversation, you may naturally wonder, will your actions match what you are telling me? Stay with this, because that question is exactly what has been echoing inside them. They have imagined approaching you more than once. In those private moments, the first sentence always seems easy. Then comes the second. Then the third. And suddenly they reach the part they cannot escape, the part where honesty requires responsibility. They would have to explain why they waited. Why certain moments became confusing. Why they allowed silence to fill spaces where clarity should have existed. And most importantly, they would have to admit something about themselves they only recently became ready to recognize. Don't skip here. This is the confession beneath the confession. They were waiting to feel completely ready. But complete readiness never arrived. Instead, something wiser appeared. The understanding that courage does not always come before the conversation. Sometimes courage appears because you finally decide the conversation matters more than your hesitation. Your soulmate is beginning to understand this now. They cannot control your response. They cannot rewrite yesterday. They cannot predict every possibility ahead. But they can choose honesty. And that is where their message becomes important. They want you to know that their silence was never supposed to become the final answer. Somewhere along the way, they simply became caught between what they felt and what they believed they were prepared to express. Those are two very different things. And now the distance between them is becoming smaller. Wait until you hear what changed it. Your soulmate began imagining two possible futures. In one, they finally speak. Maybe everything does not instantly become perfect. Maybe questions remain. Maybe both of you need time to understand what comes next. But at least the truth exists between you. In the other future, they remain silent. Days continue. Life continues. You continue growing. New opportunities appear. New chapters begin. And eventually, the conversation they kept postponing becomes something they can only replay inside their imagination. That second possibility affected them deeply. Because for the first time, they understood that hesitation is also a decision. Read that again in your heart: hesitation is also a decision. And suddenly, maybe later, stopped feeling harmless. Something huge is waiting inside this realization. Your soulmate does not want to speak merely because they are afraid of missing a moment. They want to speak because they finally understand that meaningful connections deserve clarity, even when the outcome cannot be guaranteed. But there is something you need to remember too. Their truth does not decide your worth. Their timing does not control your future. And their message, however important it may feel, should never require you to abandon your own wisdom. You are allowed to listen without rushing. You are allowed to understand without immediately deciding. You are allowed to ask whether the person standing before you today has actually grown beyond the version that once remained silent. That may be the real turning point. Because your soulmate is no longer preparing only to tell you how they feel. They are preparing to show you what they have understood. And the sentence they have struggled hardest to say is becoming clearer. I should have been honest sooner. But stay till the final moment, because even that is not the complete message. Behind those words is another truth, one connected directly to the future they have been imagining. They have started thinking about what happens after the conversation. What changes? What becomes possible? What they would need to do differently if you gave this connection another chance to be understood. And this is where everything becomes unpredictable. Your soulmate may finally be ready to tell you what they want. But before they do, they have one question for you. A question they have rehearsed privately because your answer could determine whether this unfinished chapter becomes a lesson from the past. Or the beginning of something completely different. Here comes the question they have been carrying quietly, and it is far simpler than all the complicated speeches they imagined. Your soulmate has spent so much time wondering how to explain everything that they nearly overlooked the one thing that matters first: whether you are still willing to hear them. Not promise them anything. Not instantly reopen an old chapter. Simply hear what they finally became ready to say. And strangely, that possibility feels bigger to them than any perfect outcome they once imagined. Stay close, because their question is not, will you choose me? It is closer to this. Can we finally talk honestly? That changes the entire meaning of the moment. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that genuine connection cannot be built from assumptions. They cannot decide what you feel without asking you. They cannot expect you to understand what they never explained. And they certainly cannot arrive after a period of uncertainty and expect everything to immediately become exactly as it once was. So their thinking has matured. Instead of imagining one dramatic moment that magically solves everything, they are imagining a conversation. A calm beginning. Two people finally saying what remained unsaid. Questions being answered without games. Feelings being acknowledged without pressure. And whatever happens afterward being chosen with awareness rather than guesswork. But wait, the biggest shift is still coming. Your soulmate has stopped viewing you only through memories. They are thinking about who you are becoming. That matters because while they were processing their own emotions, you were changing too. Your standards may have changed. Your dreams may have expanded. Things you once tolerated may no longer belong in your future. And your soulmate knows that meeting the present version of you requires something completely different from simply returning to the past. They would need to meet you where you are now, not where they remember you. Don't skip this next realization. For perhaps the first time, they are asking themselves what they could actually contribute to your future rather than only thinking about what they want from you. Can they bring clarity instead of confusion? Consistency instead of mixed signals? Can they listen when something matters to you? Can they respect your pace instead of expecting everything on theirs? These questions have transformed their message. And maybe that is why they almost changed their mind about telling you. Once they understood that honesty would require growth afterward, the conversation became real. Yet instead of disappearing from it, they are moving closer. Something inside them is saying, if you mean it, become capable of showing it. That sentence changed them. And there is something else I want you to notice. If this story has made you think differently about your own journey, you can share it with someone who values meaningful connections. Leave your perspective in the comments, and subscribe if you want to continue exploring these moments together. Now stay until the final line, because the message has reached the point your soulmate could no longer avoid. They have made one internal promise. Not a promise that you will automatically become theirs. Not a promise that everything will unfold exactly as imagined. Their promise is about themselves. If the opportunity to speak appears, they do not want fear or hesitation choosing their words anymore. They want to be truthful. They want to listen to your truth too. And if your answer is different from what they hoped, they want to respect it. Because somewhere during all this reflection, your soulmate discovered that caring about someone is not about controlling the ending. It is about being brave enough to meet reality honestly. Before you go, hear this line. The message they have been preparing may begin with an apology for waiting. But it does not end there. After explaining what changed inside them, after admitting what they should have said earlier, and after asking whether you are willing to have that conversation, they want to reveal one final decision. A decision about the future. They have been considering a step they once believed they were nowhere near ready to take. And the surprising part is that this step is not designed to pull you backward. It is meant to discover whether the two of you could move forward differently. No repeating old patterns. No pretending unanswered questions never existed. A new beginning would have to actually be new. And that is why the next thing they want to tell you could be the most important part of this entire message. Because your soulmate is no longer asking, what if I lose the chance to speak? They are asking something much bigger. If we get one honest opportunity to begin again, what kind of future could we create from everything we finally understand now? And now the future they kept refusing to picture has started appearing clearly in their mind. Not as some perfect fantasy where every unanswered question disappears overnight, but as something far more meaningful, a possibility built differently from the beginning. Your soulmate has reached a realization they could not have reached earlier. If they come forward, they cannot simply ask you to return to what existed before. They have to offer you a reason to believe something new could exist now. Stay a little longer, because this is where their important message becomes a decision. For days, perhaps longer, they have mentally returned to one question: if I finally tell them everything, what am I actually asking for? At first, they thought the answer was obvious. Another chance. Another conversation. Another opportunity to The next movement is no longer happening only inside their thoughts. Your soulmate has reached that rare point where reflection begins demanding action, where endlessly imagining the conversation no longer feels enough. For so long, they could postpone everything by telling themselves they needed more clarity. But now clarity has arrived with an uncomfortable question: if I already know what matters, why am I still waiting? Stay right here, because this is where their private realization begins becoming something you could actually notice. They have started thinking about the first real step. Not some overwhelming gesture. Not a perfectly planned moment. Something simple enough to be genuine, a message, an honest opening, a chance to speak without pretending everything is ordinary. And every time they imagine taking that step, the same nervous hesitation returns. Yet something different happens now. Instead of immediately backing away, they remain with the thought. That is new. Don't skip this shift. Previously, uncertainty always won. They would think of speaking, imagine everything that might go differently than expected, and convince themselves that silence was safer. Now they are seeing the flaw in that pattern. Silence never gave them certainty. It only delayed the moment when reality could finally replace imagination. And your soulmate is becoming tired of guessing. They do not want to guess what you think. They do not want to guess whether you remember. They do not want to guess whether the connection still has a future. They want to know. But there is a powerful difference between wanting an answer and demanding one, and your soulmate is beginning to understand it. They know you may need time. They know your perspective could be completely different from theirs. They know that whatever they finally reveal does not create an obligation for you to respond in the way they imagined. Strangely, accepting that has made them more ready to speak. Because now the conversation is becoming less about controlling an outcome and more about finally respecting the truth. Wait until you hear what they realized next. While imagining how they would approach you, your soulmate suddenly remembered something small from your connection. Perhaps a conversation where you valued honesty. Perhaps a moment when you showed that clarity mattered more to you than perfect words. Whatever the memory was, it reminded them of something they should have understood much earlier. You were never asking them to be perfect. You simply needed them to be real. That realization landed differently. All this time, they had been trying to prepare the perfect explanation when what mattered most was authenticity. No carefully constructed sentence could replace that. No dramatic opening could substitute for simply saying, "This is what I should have told you." And now their message has become surprisingly clear. They want to acknowledge what happened. They want to explain what changed. They want to hear your side without interrupting it with assumptions. Then they want to ask whether anything meaningful can be built from where both of you stand today. Not yesterday. Today. Stay till the final moment, because that distinction matters more than it appears. Your soulmate understands that you may not be the same person they remember. Life has continued shaping you. Your perspective may be stronger. Your boundaries may be clearer. Your vision of the future may have expanded beyond anything they previously understood. And instead of seeing that growth as something separating you, they are beginning to admire it. It has challenged them. It has made them ask whether they too have grown enough to meet a different future. That is why their next step carries so much meaning. They are not merely considering returning to your life. They are questioning whether they can arrive differently, more aware, more consistent, more willing to communicate. But there is still one last barrier. One thought has repeatedly stopped their hand just before action. They keep wondering whether they waited too long. Whether your heart has already moved beyond the conversation. Whether opening this door now would matter at all. And just when that doubt almost convinces them to remain silent again, another thought answers it. I cannot know without being honest. That may become the sentence that finally moves everything forward. Because your soulmate is approaching a moment where they must choose between protecting themselves from uncertainty and discovering what is actually possible. And there is one final truth they have not yet admitted, the deepest reason they kept returning to you in their thoughts when they believed they should simply move forward. That reason has almost nothing to do with nostalgia. It has everything to do with what they recognized in you only after time gave them enough perspective to finally see it. And once you understand what they recognized, their entire message, and why they nearly